Welcome to this deep dive, where we're going to explore the world of electric vehicle battery recycling. You're interested in what happens to all those batteries when they're no longer powering our cars, right?
Right.
We're going to break it down using excerpts from this article titled "Yemi Hataochan too," which, for those of us who don't speak Korean, roughly translates to EV battery recycling. Challenges and opportunities for the future, and the big question we're tackling is, can we create a truly circular economy for these batteries?
Yeah, it's a critical question because we're not just talking about a few thousand batteries here. The EV market has absolutely exploded. Remember back in 2019 when it felt like barely anyone was driving an electric car?
Yeah, it seemed like such a novelty back then.
Well, since then, EV sales have more than tripled their market share in 2021 alone. 6.6 million EVs were sold globally, and the projections are mind-blowing, tens of millions more hitting the roads in the next 5 years.
Wow, so we're about to have a whole lot of EV batteries needing a new home. That sounds like a huge challenge, but also maybe a huge opportunity.
Exactly. We got to figure out what to do with all these batteries when they reach the end of their life. It's not just about keeping them out of landfills. This is about the environmental impact of mining for those raw materials, potential resource scarcity as demand increases, and even economic opportunities tied to figuring out how to recycle these things effectively.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty. What exactly are we dealing with when we talk about an EV battery?
A lithium-ion battery, which is what powers most EVs, is a pretty complex piece of technology. Think of it as a carefully orchestrated assembly of components, each with its own unique recycling challenges.
Okay, so not like tossing your soda can in the recycling bin.
Not quite. The article highlights a few key components. You've got the anode, the cathode, and of course lithium, but there are other essential metals involved too, like nickel, manganese, and cobalt. And to really understand the challenge, you've got to consider the level of precision involved in creating these batteries.
Okay, give me an example. What makes these batteries so tricky to recycle?
Let's take the cathode powder. It's not just some random dust. It's meticulously manufactured to create spherical particles, each one a mere 10 microns in diameter. To put that in perspective, that's smaller than the width of a human hair, and these particles have very specific crystal structures. That complexity highlights just how difficult it is to reclaim and reuse these materials. It's like trying to unbake a cake and perfectly separate the flour, sugar, and eggs.
So we're dealing with incredibly intricate technology here, but we need those raw materials to build these batteries in the first place, which means mining, right?
Unfortunately, yes. Right now, we're heavily reliant on mining to get those materials, and those sources are often concentrated in specific geographic locations, which raises some serious questions.
The article mentions lithium from Chile and cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo as prime examples.
Right, and those sources come with baggage. The lithium extraction process in Chile's Atacama Desert, for example, uses vast amounts of water in a region that's already incredibly dry. Plus, there's the waste generated by the process, and then there's cobalt mining in the DRC, which is often linked to some pretty awful human rights issues, including child labor.
It's definitely a tricky situation, so even if we could wave a magic wand and make mining perfectly clean and ethical, it sounds like recycling is still going to be essential.
Absolutely. Reducing our reliance on mining is critical for the environment and for ethical reasons.
Okay, so we've got millions of batteries on the horizon, and mining comes with its own set of problems. What's the current state of EV battery recycling? Have we figured it out yet?
Not quite. Remember this circular economy idea we talked about? It means creating a closed loop where we reuse materials over and over. It's proving to be a tough nut to crack when it comes to EV batteries. The recycling rates are nowhere near what we see for something like lead-acid batteries, which are recycled almost entirely for lithium-ion batteries. We're talking about a paltry 15% recycling rate in the U.S. back in 2019.
Wow, only 15%. That's pretty dismal. What's making it so hard to recycle these things?
Well, partly it's the complexity we talked about earlier. Disassembling these batteries and extracting those valuable materials is difficult and expensive. Plus, the existing recycling methods have limitations. There are two main approaches: pyrometallurgy and hydrometallurgy.
Those sound pretty intense. Break those down for me.
Think of pyrometallurgy like using a blast furnace to extract metal from ore. It's effective, but it uses a ton of energy and can release harmful gases into the environment. Plus, you don't even recover all the valuable minerals. Lithium, for example, often gets lost in the process.
So it's a bit of a brute force approach. What about hydrometallurgy?
Hydrometallurgy is more like a delicate chemical bath. It uses acid to dissolve the battery and then solvents to carefully separate out the different metals. It has the potential to be more efficient and recover a wider range of materials than pyrometallurgy.
Okay, so why aren't we all doing hydrometallurgy then? Sounds like the winner.
It's not quite that simple. The technology is still evolving, and it comes down to cost. Can recycled materials truly compete on price with newly mined minerals? That's the million-dollar question, and the answer isn't so clear-cut.
So it seems like we're in a bit of a bind. We know we need to recycle, but the existing methods have their drawbacks. Are there any promising solutions on the horizon?
That's where things get really interesting. Despite the challenges, there's a lot of innovation happening in the EV battery recycling space. Some incredibly bright minds are tackling this problem head on, and they're coming up with some truly exciting solutions.
So we're not doomed to a future of battery mountains and mining mayhem. Tell me more about these innovations. The article mentioned a couple of promising approaches.
Two really stand out. One is called direct recycling, a method being explored at the Resell Center, which is a collaboration between national labs and universities. The goal is to skip the melting or dissolving steps entirely and recover the cathode powder directly.
Wait, so they can just pluck out the good stuff? How does that even work?
It's still in the early stages, but it has the potential to be a game changer. Imagine being able to carefully disassemble a watch to salvage the tiny gears and springs. They're trying to apply that level of precision to battery disassembly. If they could pull it off, it would be a huge win for both cost and environmental impact.
That's a fascinating analogy. So it's like a high-tech, microscopic salvage operation. What's the other innovation the article mentioned?
The second one is called advanced hydrometallurgy. Remember the acid bath we talked about earlier?
Well,
Well, these companies are coming up with proprietary techniques to make that process more efficient and recover even more of those valuable materials.
proprietary hair. Sounds like some secret sauce chemistry going on there.
It is pretty cutting-edge stuff. There's some exciting startups working on this, like American Battery Technology Company and Redwood Materials, both based in Nevada, interestingly enough.
Nevada's becoming quite the battery hub, isn't it? First the Gigafactory and now all this recycling innovation.
There must be something in the water out there. But getting back to the innovations, American Battery Technology Company, for example, is taking inspiration from the Tesla Gigafactory by applying reverse manufacturing techniques to battery recycling.
Reverse manufacturing, what does that mean?
Instead of just shredding the batteries, which is what a lot of traditional recyclers do, they're disassembling them strategically, separating out the valuable components, and then using targeted chemical processes to extract the metals they claim to recover, over 90% of the high-value elements this way.
90%, that's impressive. But let's say we've got the tech figured out. There's still the issue of actually getting those batteries from, say, my garage to a recycling facility.
That's a great point. The logistics of getting batteries from end-of-life vehicles to recycling plants is a huge challenge. We need to build what the article calls a battery pipeline, and that's going to require some serious collaboration.
So it's not just about the technology, it's about the whole system.
Exactly. We need a smooth flow from the moment a battery dies in a car to its arrival at a recycling facility that's going to require partnerships between automakers, recycling companies, and policymakers.
Partnerships seem to be a recurring theme in all these big global challenges. It's encouraging to see those partnerships starting to form. The article mentions some examples, right?
Yes, it highlights collaborations between American Battery Technology Company and major automakers like GM, Ford, and Stellantis, and Redwood Materials is working with companies like Volkswagen, Toyota, and Ford.
It seems like we're starting to build some real momentum here, but let's be honest, the bottom line is always going to be, well, the bottom line, can these recycled materials actually compete with the cost of digging up new stuff?
That's the million-dollar question. Can recycled materials compete with virgin minerals on price? It's the key to making a circular economy for batteries a reality.
Do we have an answer?
It's not a simple yes or no. Some experts are skeptical about the feasibility of a truly closed-loop system, at least in the short term, because of things like labor costs and the energy needed to run those recycling processes.
But hold on, isn't there a point where the cost of mining new materials gets so high, especially with all the ethical and environmental baggage, that recycling just makes more economic sense?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And many are betting on that scenario. There are a few things that could tip the scales in favor of recycling.
Like what?
Government incentives and regulations could play a role. The EU, for example, is looking at guidelines that would require a certain percentage of recycled materials in new batteries that could help create a level playing field.
So a little nudge from policymakers could be helpful.
It could definitely accelerate things. And then there's the issue of rising transportation and import costs for mined minerals. As those costs increase, domestic recycled materials become more competitive. It could actually create an economic advantage for recycling.
That's an interesting angle I hadn't considered. As the saying goes, follow the money.
Exactly. And it's not just the economics as the technology improves. And recycling operations scale up, the cost of producing those recycled materials is likely to come down, making them even more competitive. It's a dynamic situation, and things are changing rapidly.
This is giving me hope. It's not just about doom and gloom. There's genuine progress being made, but I think it's easy to feel like individual actions don't really make a difference in a problem this big. What can everyday people like me actually do to support responsible battery recycling?
That's a great question, and the good news is you have more power than you might think. So it's not just about tossing your old phone in the right bin.
What else can I do?
It's a great place to start, but there's so much more. Think about the choices you make when you buy an EV. Do some research on the manufacturers. What are their policies on responsible sourcing of battery materials? Do they have solid recycling programs in place? Putting your money behind companies that prioritize these things sends a powerful message.
That makes sense. It's like voting with your wallet, right? Supporting the companies that are doing things the right way.
Exactly, and remember the power of your voice. Let your elected officials know that you care about this issue. Support policies that encourage and incentivize EV battery recycling. Those policies can create a more level playing field, making recycling a more attractive option for companies.
So write to my congressperson, show up at town halls, be that person who brings up battery recycling at every opportunity. Got it.
You got it. A well-informed and passionate constituent can make a real difference. But let's zoom out for a second. If we could create the perfect system for EV battery recycling, what would that look like? What's the ultimate goal here?
What's the EV battery recycling utopia? Paint me a picture.
The ultimate goal is a truly closed-loop system, a circular economy, where those valuable materials are constantly reused, minimizing the need to mine for new ones. Imagine a world where every single EV battery gets recycled, and those recovered materials are used to create brand new batteries.
That would be incredible, not just for the environment, but for lessening our reliance on mining in those ethically challenging regions.
Right, it's a win-win. But to get there, we need a multifaceted approach. Technological innovations, supportive policies, responsible corporate practices, and engaged consumers all have a part to play.
It's a team effort, but we haven't even touched on the most radical idea in the article, the one that really blew my mind.
You're talking about the idea that maybe, just maybe, the push for a truly circular economy could start not with governments or corporations, but with consumer demand.
That's the one. It sounds crazy, but also kind of brilliant.
What if consumers actively seek out products made with recycled battery materials? What if they're willing to pay a little extra, knowing those materials came from a responsible source?
So it's not just about recycling the batteries, it's about creating a demand for those recycled materials, closing the loop.
Exactly. If consumers make it clear that they want products made with recycled battery components, that sends a huge signal to the entire industry.
Companies would have to scramble to keep up right. They'd be investing in recycling tech, finding ways to improve those processes, even designing products with recyclability in mind from the very beginning.
It could trigger a cascade of innovation and accelerate the transition to a truly circular economy, all because consumers decided to flex their buying power.
Wow, it's a powerful idea, like a ripple effect, starting with individual choices and impacting the whole system.
And it's not just about the money you spend, it's about using your voice support. The companies that are walking the walk advocate for policies that make recycling easier and more cost-effective. Talk to your friends and family about this stuff. Spread the word.
I'm getting fired up here. This feels less like a problem and more like what was that phrase used earlier?
A battery-powered revolution.
Yes, a battery-powered revolution driven by informed and engaged consumers. I love it.
A powerful concept with the potential to make a real difference.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything.
Yeah.
This has been an incredibly informative deep dive into the world of EV battery recycling. I feel like I've gone from feeling overwhelmed to feeling well-empowered, like I can actually be part of the solution.
That's what we were hoping for. It's a complex issue, but it's one we can all tackle together. Remember, the future of EV battery recycling is still being written, and we all have a role to play in shaping that future.
So keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a more sustainable future. The choices we make today will shape the world of tomorrow. And on that inspiring note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those batteries charged.